The organs of sense the organs of sense are infinite, only in that they detect the infinite without becoming it. I know the bounds of sense and can make no conclusion. It is safe to assume that no law could be sustained in an environment so very consumptive, so hellish. The attempt here being nothing more than to accurately depict in words what goes on in the space between two unspecified thoughts. In this fraudulent era, this pious era of sought conjectures rather than sought truths, we are pious in this pious era, and happily claim the useless to be the summit of all contention, and thought shall, in the air of contention, dwindle to inane and bookish rumors, without fine reason, sportive and awake, still green, and laughing at the ignorance of nobler thought, gunning for the truth nobly, and failing as the light from day, as by degrees the day becomes the night, by each slow, slothful interim, apparelled in blunt mystery, forcing its blunt motives to stall the cheated brain, hissing slash quarreling between the two, so slothfully that one has bled into the other. The unreal mind will think in heinous rhythms of unrest, if not imprisoned by the very brain that caused that unrest. The ceaseless, hallowed hazard of the unreal mind. Frustrated atoms, left without a vessel of the physical to vault and so repress more lyrical, though temporary states, obvious deconstructions, which by the aid of such repression organize the expression and nourish the content, starving beauty, which while it soothe the rhythms of unrest will leave the words without the natural awe needed. Without the actual awe needed to describe the natural self in scary, though figurative abstractions. At last, it goes beyond the cheapness of an end, which as of now cannot be found. So then, the truth, this abstraction of truth, is an eternal shard to me. It is elusive as the dominant flame that rises in black poison. Air of smoke emitting from the windows of the house. Yellow fury bruising into blackened plumes shall not be so considered with terror, but instead with fascination, in that the burning structure proves the absence of the truth, existing in the solitary breaches of a world abruptly switched. The house shall fall undignified to silent burning and elemental cinders, and yet it was the only house for miles. And nobody had witnessed the destruction of something that had so long been and now was not. Burning house. I guess what I'm saying is that poetry is alive, and the sublime is not about beauty, but about making something into something not quite right, but right because it is not right. Because if we were to see the violent vision for what it was, if words did not enjoy a safe enough distance from the horror, if the words assume that they know the horror, then they do not know it and seem trite and dogmatic. Obscurity in words, it seems, provides us with a buffer zone, gives the reader the impression of observing a burning building from a safe distance. The true poem does not try to redeem itself, but the reader. The poem does not think it needs to be redeemed, just as Kafka did not need to prove the world that he suffered, and by disguising his anguish made it all the more vivid. The true poem tells you how it is with words that are not how it is, but in a way that seems as if the way it is wrong. What history forgotten, what fraud in the brain, what sinister apathy is played out before us here. The minister of all aloneness, all hope, all fleeting hope, that soon is not a presence or even a ghost. It is the shadow of remembered anomalies in life that have passed by and beckon the absurd. Upon returning home, he encounters the frail spaces of life between these mediocre walls. In motion, he is picture rather than portrait. The mind is the ultimate metaphor. It generates all different sorts of eternities that can still be understood, but not fully. It lives within a physicality. It denies the unsought and alleviates the soul with moments of validity, whether in language or action. Pursuing a finer mold, the closeted spectrum spies from the bush the unseen simulacrum, the presage, lying still lucrative as bees regarding communication, between the secretive explanations robed in qualms that do not distinguish from one to the other, at least when you want to find out which one is more relevant. Each one is important, but some such importance is not discovered until the mind learns to disrobe and see itself naked, delinquent in the depth. The argument is shallow, though still a sect of reality is retained. My brain brings it back to flawed mantra. The unreal mind struggles. If all that I have said is false, that means the opposite of all that I have said is true. If all that I have said is true, then the opposite of what I have said is false. Thus, one need only find the single truth by wangling out the opposing view from the one I state, or by taking me at my word. However, this is unlikely, because finding truth is not as simple as that. Most likely there is a dispersal of truth and falsehood in my work, so that even if one were to express in their minds the opposite of what I say, it will, they still could not see it as truth. It is that dispersal that causes the subject of truth from ever being fully proven, I suppose. It would seem, considering this, and considering the alleged depth of my subject matter, that I have uncovered deep and lasting things without knowing them as true things. If this were not a fact, then one could merely, as I have said, descry the opposite of everything I have said in order to uncover the mystery for why we are here. Since this mystery cannot be uncovered, we must assume that I am right in some respects and wrong in others. Mystery depends upon the factual as much as the erroneous, for these two poles will blur the lines and keep one from establishing an adequate way to weed out the myths. The opposite pole need not be true, necessarily. Falsehood is just as crucial in clarifying the idea as truth is in making it muddled. The question I pose: when shall we find it fitting to approach the opposite idea as truth, or leave the original idea intact and whole as truth? By figuring this out, we figure the spaces into spheres, so that the brain can understand how shaky the hand of thought. So if it can be written, it can be alive. So it can be alive in the consciousness as a formative equation, not yet planned out beyond the calypso of a figurative abstraction which changes often, and not only its mind. I imitate myself in this, which by the very instinct of myself will hack down the scrabby scruples and the principles into more decisive, quickened benefits of prose. One law that proves another until the contrary is reached, and so on in this tragic cycle. So that in creating law by this pattern of assumed logic, one would, it seems, fathom the arbitrary nature of all evidence and reveal that I ape the universe with a false object. Doubt to him is not acquired as one would taste for fine art. It lived in them from the beginning. Dying, the thing fell as the calyx of a neglected rose onto the floor from a forgotten bouquet, held like a pause in the vacant urn, and this banished limb lies on the floor, communicating a vague and alienating majesty in silent, unassuming solitude. Such a brain as this, working too hard, pretty unhealthy, upon authorities of dissembled omens, reported catastrophes and scary myths, purported truths by the scary logic of the ridiculous, that for so long dimmed the hue of seeking thought, forever futile in arrival, approaching the statures of natural law through inadequate means of appraisal, tormenting the scrupulous by sacking the earnest fact from careful, scrupulous vision. It can communicate the simple verifications and whiten the black rims of dead and shout. I pretended. Looking at something else, found that what I had been looking at was no longer there, and yet recollection of the form persisted with equal element, with great clarity as to the contours and rhythms of the object I had viewed, so that the object still was there, but merely in my head, forming out the same dull spunks of limited realities, coagulating into the angular defined intent of the corporeal, things too lazy to find their way back to energy, which forms the thing out of its own absence. In other words, we are derived from nothing, I guess. Nothing which is, for all intents and purposes, a literary term, to be studied by intellectual go-getters and bookish dilettantes. without an education in the haunt of secret faces, which wrinkle together into a face that is not a face, but a pressure of hideous wrinkles. Who understands this when the subsequent rumors regarding my crazy acquisition of knowledge, fake knowledge, primal knowledge that is fake because the first thing is always fake? In other words, words as these could not be sustained some such ad infinitum, which is unlike the specter / form used only once but forever and ever once. Can't you see that there is no nothing, just lack of everything, so that one is able to summon the ignorance of themselves like a penitent genius? They attempt to disprove themselves, utilizing transitory experiment and felicitous narrative. This is the part of the missive where I say that I am right. It is the possession of version rather than vision, the ineffable, calling it something that is not it, yet it is that, since if you call it that, that must be what it is. In the context of temporary logic at least, the crowning equipage, the infinite object, the name of the thing, that is indeed a part of what it is called, but only through reference and connotation and denotation. A name not how it should be called. There is no word but the one that is between the two poles of reason, dwelling though feebly in neither, and yet an integral part of both, and how it creates through some cosmic some cosmic spasm, a synthetic void, an emulsion of negated apothemes. Call it that, and it is that, and something else, something not yet found, then found to be untrue, before the truth in it has a chance to be discovered. And so is not discovered. A part of it lingers anyway, in truth, even though it is no longer truth. These partial fabrications are the spook that tells of my demise, the prying harbinger, ringing his metaphysical bell, galloping on horse down the path of the psyche, the little dreams of analytical men, dreams that are simple, stuffed with simple animal desires and confusions, and in the wake of such confusion, the innocence of one who has not taken the time to think about this. Even so, his affinity with the universe is more lasting, is deeper than benign assumptions of benign intelligences, and all the masturbation of a mind too caught in elegant limbo. Innocence is where lies the greatest clarity of thought, I guess. Come on, save the dance for the loser in the corner. He knows, of course, the serious nature of all things, and all things that are not, and uproots the roots, foundations beneath, more foundations beneath, layers of nonsense. To me it will, in following a pattern, not be nonsense, but a new sense, a sense not sense, contained in neither, and a part of both.